Hello there, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm here with delightful and very, very impressive Max Helmer from the Low Carb Consultant. He's also a fellow YouTuber, a content creator. He talks all about the carnivore diet, low carb, keto, about training, exercise, life hacks, food, all that kind of thing. So I imagine a lot of the followers will be right involved in this sort of thing. And we'll definitely get a lot of useful insights, but I will let him explain who he is. But essentially, he has a YouTube channel and he interviews lots of different people, talks about his own life experiences as well, and showcases pretty much what can be achieved in the upper echelon of carnivory in this space online. So how you doing, Max? And tell me a bit more about yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Jonathan. It's great to chat with you again, man. So I do a podcast called the Low Carb Consultant Podcast and YouTube channel, where I interview doctors, experts, trainers, athletes, coaches, typically through a low carb lens. So, we've had on Professor Seafried. That episode's not live yet, but we've had everyone from Craig and Maria Emmerich on, to Bronson Dant, to ex-CrossFit athletes, utilizing the carnivore diet, all the way up to, like I said, Professor Seafried, and Bella, Steak and Butter Gal, Dr. Chafee, all those types of people. And I typically, my goal with the podcast isn't necessarily, now I can get into how I eat now and what I tilt towards in terms of carnivore, keto, low carb. But the whole goal of the podcast, when I originally had the idea for it, was not to come on and say, this diet is the best diet and this is how everyone should eat. I truly believe everyone is a little bit different. They're coming from different backgrounds. They also have different health and wellness conditions that they're trying to heal. And so really what I wanted it to be was a platform where people can go to and learn about different low carb diets, keto, carnivore, fasting, intermittent fasting, so they can gain the information and ultimately utilize that information and massage that into their life based off of whatever it is that they're trying to do. If they're new and they don't feel like going into carnivore right out of the gate, they can go low carb, then keto, then carnivore. And we have all the information on there from different experts in regards to, how to transition yourself into some of these diets, what diet is useful, for what circumstance, all those types of things. And so that's really what I designed the podcast and the YouTube channel to be, is a platform where we gather the perspectives from different experts, doctors, trainers around their thoughts and ideas, so we can disseminate those things to the masses and people can ultimately gain as much information as possible from experts and then do what they feel like is best for them. That's really what my thought process was when I was designing the Low Carb Consultant podcast.
Sure, that's pretty cool. I mean, it kind of reminds me a bit of the Carnivore cast that was out a few years ago with my friend
Ms. Linsky.
Ms. Linsky, yeah, definitely. And also there's Casey Ruff from Boundless Body Radio, similar sort of perspective really. But it's interesting just to hear, because of course now you're doing lots of video interviews and things like that. You've got almost like the latest perspectives of these people. And that's quite interesting for me, because I've been listening to people for years in the carnivore space, maybe 8 years or so. And I've heard things come and go, different trends. And today kind of want to talk to you a bit today about how things have changed over the years. I'll say broadly speaking, the low carb space, especially since maybe once either of us first started the carnivore or low carb or keto style dieting. But it'd be interesting to see. I mean, going back in time, maybe 2 years ago, a lot of it was about high fat carnivore, 80% fat, 20% protein by calories. Was that something you ever tried yourself, and is your thoughts on that change at all over the years?
Yeah, it was something that I tried myself. And to be completely honest with you, from a metabolism standpoint, I always had issues with being like an ultra high fat carnivore. So now I would say my diet is mostly carnivore / ketovore, like it's majority meat, eggs. I'm a big fan of the crock pot, so I make stews, like beef shank stew with, carrots and onions in it. That's probably the the extent of the veggies that I'll have at this point. But yeah, you know, high fat carnivore early in the day, or earlier on, it was always hard for me to go super high fat, mainly because from a digestive standpoint, I was always running into issues. Like if my fat and my protein ratio was 2 to 1, fat to protein, that for me specifically is a little bit too high. Meaning it would send me to the bathroom with diarrhea. So I always kind of fluttered around like a 1-to-1 protein to fat. Sometimes I would flutter around a 2-to-1 protein to fat. And some people might think like, oh, so you're like a high protein, moderate fat carnivore. For a long period of time, to be honest with you, that's what worked really, really well for me. For me personally, I didn't have any digestive issues. I was lean. I still had a good amount of body fat on my body, which I could also use as an energy source. I never really felt like I needed to go super high fat. And I'm a pretty active guy. I work out every day. There was a period of time where I was training for marathons and half marathons, and I wasn't ultra high fat. For the amount of energy, my energy intake, I just didn't need all that fat in my body. Like I ran a full marathon completely fasted on a high protein, moderate fat carnivore diet. It was when I actually did that, it was maybe a little bit closer 1-to-1 protein to fat ratio, but I just never needed a high fat carnivore diet. It just never really agreed with me from a digestive perspective, but I know that's not the case, right? And that's the beauty of having these conversations. I think the one thing I'm learning from these podcasts is, people will come in, they'll comment, they're like, oh, you got to have high fat. That's the best way to go. Or, to get leaner, you need to drop the fat and go high protein. At the end of the day, I think what people need to do is really experiment with their diet and figure out what works best for them, what their body responds well to, and maybe experiment. And that's what's going to give you the magic sauce for you specifically. But yeah, that's just my thoughts there.
That's a good point you made, especially at the end about, doing the experiment side of things. I mean, I'm a bodybuilder, so by virtue of being a bodybuilder, your whole life is an experiment. How do you build the most amount of muscle and achieve the lowest body fat percentage possible? Different sort of techniques and protocols, but it's important to know, I guess, as commentators on this, to know when to pivot. So, like you said earlier, people say, oh, I've done high fat carnivore, I feel great, this, that, and the other. It's true, they probably do. I don't think they're lying. But the thing is, your body's a biologically dynamic system. It's not something which is in a standpoint all the time.
Yeah.
On myself, I've tried the high fat approach, tried the high protein approach. For me as well, I notice I feel better. My body composition is better. My strength is improved faster. My recovery is better doing a high protein, moderate fat diet.
Yeah.
To be specific, because people, if I say high or moderate, it doesn't really mean much to most people. So just to be specific, so my protein's at 430 grams, carbs are at 33, dairy, eggs, things like that. And my fat is at currently about 240 grams. So, 430 protein, 240 fat.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at the moment in my off season, and that keeps me relatively weight stable at about 106, 107 kilos. But what I notice as well is it's effectively a mass in, mass out equation. So, I could drop 30 grams of fat from my diet. That might mean that my body senses that the adrenal hormones kick up to, speed up gluconeogenesis from the breakdown of protein into glucose molecules. I actually find my physique is drier as well, so my skin's more taut. I look lean. Like my definition's greater in my body if I do high protein, low fat, and that's even acutely. I'm not talking about the end long term 4 to 12 week body composition changes. I mean, if I go from high fat one day to low fat the next day, I will be considerably drier and leaner looking on the second day.
Yeah.
That's been my experience, and I think now people are gravitating more towards the 1-to-1 ratio. I think in terms of protein to fat grams, I think the 80-20 calorie amount is. I don't like personally the idea of trying to fit things into percentage, because these are I think of them separate levers. So you got protein lever and a fat lever. And what's to say that you feel perfect 75% of your calories from fat and 25 from protein versus 80 and 20? It could be that small, slight change or adjustment that means you hit satiety, appropriately. It means you can maintain your body composition. It means you can build muscle. So I don't like to look at things that way. I think that's where that methodology, the calories in, calories out, and the percentage, ratios of macros is quite, like I said, it's stale, it's outdated, it's old hat. It's just a weaker way of doing it. And I think just experimenting is probably more important, because it might be you're 1-to-1, but then one day you're ravenous. Maybe you've done circuits at the gym, you've been for a swim, you've, I don't know, walked to and from the gym, you've gone to pick up your children from school. Yeah, you might need more protein that day. Maybe it's 30 grams extra or something. That'll throw off that ratio automatically. But the ratio is meant to be just a guideline. It's not an endpoint. So I think what we're trying to do here, basically, in the carnivore space, is get to a point where we eat when we want to and stop when we don't.
Yep. Then
maintain a healthy body composition, achieve the goals we want to achieve with whatever our body weight might happen to be. And yes, I mean, that's what I try and gravitate people towards. So I'd say for most people I work with as a coach, maybe 6 months in, I can sort of say, okay, I'll release the reins a bit now. You can go more loose, so you can sort of up and down things a little bit in terms of protein and fat. But that's after experimentation where I've optimized their sleep, the training recovery is good, and making strength progression. So I know things are quite stable in that regard. What else is there? I mean, I think about a year ago, there's a sardine fast. Did you hear of that one?
Yeah, I did hear about that one. And I wanted to ask you this real quick, being a bodybuilder, because I think this is where bodybuilders actually have this part right. And you said it earlier, right? The body is a dynamic energy system, right? And I was talking to Robert Sykes about this. I was on his podcast like 2 weeks ago. And this is where I think bodybuilders have it right, because throughout the year, they're going through a building phase, maybe where their calories are increasing, they're consuming more fat, they're trying to put on weight. And then over a period of time, if they're cutting for a show, they might be dropping calories, maybe skipping meals, trying to incorporate some fasting, or changing the macronutrient ratio to where they're lowering the fat, keeping the protein high, maintaining as much gains as they possibly can. But what's interesting is when you look at a bodybuilder, and this is why I'm asking you this question, because I want to get your 2 cents on this. This is what Robert Sykes was talking about. When you look at a normal person doing carnivore, let's say Kelly Hogan, for instance, she is a very high fat carnivore, and she has played around with high protein, high fat, lowering the protein. For her, from what she said to me, she has been on a higher fat carnivore diet for the length of her carnivore career or journey, let's call it. But she has done that for a lengthy period of time. And I think what's interesting from a bodybuilding perspective is you are upping the fat, dropping the fat, upping the protein, dropping the protein over the course of a year. So you're, from a metabolic standpoint, you're changing your diet throughout the year, and you're allowing your body, you're introducing basically a higher macronutrient profile to your body at certain periods, or a lower macronutrient profile throughout the year. Do you think, this is my question, do you think that enables your body to continue to adapt? Does that help like adaptation phases? Do you think that helps your body to not adapt to like one specific way of doing carnivore, like year after year after year, going through bulking and cutting phases? I was curious to ask you that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so of course, if your fat is higher versus lower, you're going to be picking different cuts of meat. So if this might be a good example. So in the off season, I'm trying to get in as much food as possible, much clean, healthy fats and proteins I can, whilst not gaining too much excess body fat, and training well, recovering well, things like that, so on and so forth. I'll be eating more cuts which are easier to consume. So that means ground or minced beef, fish digests really quickly because it's not got much collagen in it. Then there's going to be burger patties, maybe if you can find clean sausage links, things like that. So high protein, high fat foods. But then when it comes to the actual pre-contest phase, I'll be using more perhaps like cuts of steaks, things like that. I'll be having more, I don't know, chicken breast or chicken thigh, but it wouldn't be ground up sort of thing. It wouldn't be processed to an extra degree. So it's less hyper palatable in a sense. So my body has to work a bit harder to digest that food. Now, with that in mind, yes, there is a natural change or shift across the time of the year where I'm going to be eating more of some animal foods and less of others. So that might mean more mackerel, for example, in the off season. Digest well, very high fat source from fish, get lots of omega-3, stuff like that. So that might be something I consume then. Whereas in the summertime, I might gravitate more towards prawns, low fat food, high protein, lean, that sort of thing. In terms of adaptation, I think there's certainly a point, and this is mostly from a bodybuilding perspective. We're trying to change your body composition over the course of a year. Essentially, what you're trying to do is gain as much muscle as possible during the off season.
Yeah.
So when you diet down again, you've got more to show on the next time you step on stage. So the food will go up and up and up and up. Your training will go up, your strength will go up. Recovery usually improves. But there's always that bliss point in off season where if you try to eat more food, you won't sleep as well because your digestion's overhauled. You're packed, basically. In which case, there'll be a natural signal from your brain. We'll call it metaversion. So every now and then, if I have a client or someone that I speak to, they've got no appetite, what I actually do is I actually lower their food alongside their appetite. So then, therefore, when they sort of get through that dip, when their bodies relax itself, their digestion's got taken a bit of a breather sort of thing, then I'll actually increase the food back up again. But at least we know in that point in time, that was their bliss point of training. So the same thing's true of people that are on a carnivore diet that aren't bodybuilding. You have to change things up a little bit now and then. So what benefits you now might not benefit you in a few months' time.
Sure.
Perhaps in the winter months you're less active. Maybe your protein goes down because you're not walking as much, things like that. But what I personally notice anecdotally is the protein amount over the course of the year tends to remain about the same, regardless of if you're building muscle or losing fat. Of course, you can tweak it here and there if you want to slightly improve for satiety close to a show. Low energy makes you feel full. But the fat is the lever that modulates the most. It sort of moves the most. So my protein over say this last year could range between 380 and 430 grams. 430 is about as high as I've gotten ever so far. Whereas my fat, for example, Max, could be as high as 240 grams or as low as about 150 grams. So there's a larger shift, or there's a larger differentiation. There's a larger difference between the two amounts in regards to protein and fat. So that's how I think most people should be doing it. And I think where some people go wrong is they panic because, I've not been to the loo for 3 days. Something suddenly changed, but they don't realize, you've cut out coffee. You've taken a different magnesium supplement. There's usually some bottleneck somewhere where something's changed. They've not really picked it up, and that's compounded to a bigger issue. So that's how I believe diets can change over the course of a year.
And that makes sense when you really think about it, because that slightly mirrors the cyclical nature of a human being, like evolving on planet Earth. Ancestrally, from an ancestral standpoint, right? Like you're not outside, or you're not as active in the winter months because it's cold, it's darker. You might be going to sleep. You might be sleeping longer, sleep later, not as much sunlight, more sunlight in the summertime. You're out, you're more active. The macronutrients would change slightly. You might become more hungrier because you're just awake longer. You're expending more energy. It kind of mirrors that cyclical, ancestral, like you said, human being approach. But that makes sense to me,
It does seem accurate. I mean, it won't go into today, but there's an interesting question we could ask Bart K about vitamin D supplementation. He's personally not a fan of pretty much any supplements for the most part. I understand why. He's quite purist. Humans have buggered themselves up basically by adding stuff in. We've not really got worse by taking stuff out. So that's kind of his broader standpoint, I guess.
Yeah.
But, he mentioned something very interesting about vitamin D levels and how it's, I can't remember the term he used, something like binominal, biphasical, something like that. So you have a peak in the summer and a dip in the winter, but the idea is over the winter you're still sustained somewhat by what you gained in the summer.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different viewpoints, and maybe we need less vitamin D in the winter. Maybe there's something to that as well, like from our evolutionary perspective, how active we are. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, on to should we go into the sardine fast, because that's quite an interesting one. I mean, did you try anything like that, or any sort of singular food item fasts?
I have never done. Let me rephrase this. I've never eaten a sardine in my entire life, ever. Now, the only time I might have eaten a sardine was maybe when, back in the day, having a salad. I think they use sardines for certain dressings. I think like on a Caesar salad, they use sardines. That might be the only time. Never done a sardine fast. I've just basically had like an aversion to eating sardines. It's just like, I don't like the way they look. I don't like the way they smell. I've done other things like eggs nonstop. I've done that, but I've never done a sardine fast. They just never appealed to me at all. Like, I just can't do it. Like, I can eat some fish. Like, to be honest with you, I don't even really eat a lot of fish. I should probably eat more salmon, but we have a lot of frozen salmon in the fridge right now. But my wife showed me, this was a handful of months ago, there was this viral, it was like a TikTok video or Instagram video of a guy grilling salmon from Costco.
Yeah.
Do you know what Costco is? Do you have Costco out there?
We've got a few over here. Yeah.
So he bought the salmon from Costco. He thawed it out and he sliced into it. And basically, when he held up the camera to the fish, and there was basically worms sticking out of the fish. And ever since my wife showed me that video, I haven't eaten salmon. I can't do it. So it's like, I know I need to incorporate more fish into my diet. I eat a lot of tuna, but I know it doesn't have the same amino acid profile, fatty acid profile as salmon does. Yeah. But ever since she showed me that video, can't do it. Just can't do it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's a fair. I mean, there's things I don't eat. I don't eat pork.
Yeah.
Weird thing: onion rings, chocolate, berries. I couldn't even be like a paleo carnivore diet. I don't like fruit or honey or anything like that. I can't tolerate most of it. So yeah. The sardine fast, it's probably, it does have a few benefits, I guess. Lots of omega-3, low toxicity fish, high nutrient density. Moderate fat, high protein, probably quite useful if you're trying to lean out a little bit.
Yeah.
Omega-3s will help with inflammation, cognitive health. What else is there? I mean, you will stink of fish after 2 weeks, though. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah.
I'll say that much.
I
eat fish.
I can only imagine the aftertaste on your mouth. You know what I mean? It's just like, just give me like a steak and eggs and I'll be good. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean one of the pitfalls of doing a fish only diet is that the collagen within it is type 2, which means the amino acid composition within that meat, that fish, the meat of the fish is it's not of a grade which you could easily break down into the amino acids to replicate human tissue. We're, for example, more like a cow than we are like a fish. Yeah. If you think about it, so the protein structures wouldn't be as collagenous in effect if you're trying to rebuild human tissue. Yeah. So what people might actually find is they actually thin out their skin, and their risk of bleeding will be much greater from the omega-3 content. So these sort of things, there's a reason why they're called X fast, is because they don't quite do the whole job. They're meant to be something you do as an intervention short term. I've not tried it personally, but I think after 6 years of doing a carnivore diet, I feel like my levels in that regard, in terms of the amount of fish I should supposedly be eating, are completely fine. I've had my omega-3 to 6 ratio and all the subcategories of that tested, and I'm optimal for all of them, which is very unusual because you don't really expect that. But I do supplement with omega-3 oils, so that's probably part of it.
So you've never done the sardine fast?
Nah. Most have done maybe about 3 months straight. I did about 2 cans a day. So not really nothing really that Nothing in it that I think I'm going to do that. I need to optimize myself that way, and that's going to achieve whatever I want it. I don't think it will at this point.
What's just out of curiosity? What's the craziest type of thing you've done? Have you ever done like the egg fast where you just eat eggs nonstop for like a month? Have you ever done anything like that and created content around it?
No, I mean, I forget. Well, when I was probably about 11 years old, I did a water fast for 2 weeks. The interesting thing of that is, I'll sound like a liar saying this, but it is what it is. My body weight stayed the same throughout the whole experiment.
No way.
I don't even know why I did it. I think I just thought this would be a fun challenge because I think I read it in an article somewhere on a magazine my mum had, or something like that. Yeah, my body weight didn't change at all. I looked the same afterwards. I didn't suffer that much at all, really. But other than that,
did you notice any? Did you notice any cognitive benefits doing the water fast? Out of curiosity, if your body composition did change, do you think clearer or any of that?
Oh yeah. I'd say if I don't eat for about there's sort of a lag period. So if I don't eat for about 16 hours, I'll start to feel hungry then. And between like the 16th hour and the 24th hour is hard for me. It's like hard to get through. I feel hungry and think about food all the time.
Yeah.
But once I get past 24 hours, it's like my eyesight's way better. I've got perfect eyesight anyway. Everything's clearer. My senses are very astute. One notices every hour that goes by, I feel a bit better, and it gets to like that dipping point where I think my body's just tired, and I can't sleep. My adrenal hormones are too high from it's a stress to the body.
Sure.
In effect, so for me, it's like there's a fine window of it. I'm not someone that could now do a 3-4 day fast without some sort of detriment. I think for me, 1 or 2 days would be about the most.
Yeah, I've done like a 36 hour at the most, and I feel like that's the most I've ever needed. But yeah, I've noticed the same thing. Like once you get to like 16, 18 hours, you're really hungry. If you push through it, you start to feel though incredible. But then going any longer than like 36 hours, I just never really felt the need to go any longer than that. But I've interviewed a lot of people that have said amazing things about, prolonged fasting, of course, autophagy and all those types of things. And yeah, I just never really felt the need to go 2 days,
Yeah. The thing is, Max, people like us, we do resistance training, workouts and things like that. So
yeah,
we do stimulate a great deal of mitophagy during that. I can't remember the exact figure, but per unit of time, it's something like a 10-fold increase. So imagine you're spending an hour in the gym each day. I can only extrapolate. There isn't a scientific study to prove what I'm saying, but I'm imagining 1 hour of resistance training or something in the gym in a given day will equal X amount of hours of fasting.
Yeah,
in the peak fasting hours.
Dude, it was crazy. When I did the podcast with Craig Emmerich, he was saying the exact same thing. So the way to increase autophagy the most is not by doing more fasting. It's actually strength training or resistance training can increase the autophagy. And I was like, dude, that's crazy. Because I always thought the way you increase autophagy the most is by withholding the food and prolonging the fast. He said, no, strength training is what does it. And I just thought that was way crazy.
It does make sense. I mean, there are some things we can measure in our blood when we train. For example, we might know that a certain substrate in the blood that happens to be present might increase by 10-fold versus baseline levels. Okay, we can extrapolate from that maybe. The peptide craze at the moment. I mean, something like we produce something like 2 to 10 times the amount of MotS-c when we're training versus when we're not. So we do in fact create these peptides ourselves, but with the peptides, all they do is push us further in that direction, depending on what you want to achieve. That's how they work, basically. But there's a lot of hormones at play: AMPK, cortisol. Your heart rate goes up by 40, 50, 60 beats per minute usually. So yeah, I can see why that would be a benefit.
Yeah,
have you kind of covered?
Have you just out of curiosity? I've heard a lot of good things about MotS-c. I interviewed Dylan Gemelli, who was saying MotS-c is out of his top peptides he could recommend, MotS-c was, because it's essentially an exercise mimetic. So I've played around with a handful of different peptides. I know you're much more of a biohacker than I am. Have you played around with MotS-c at all, just out of curiosity?
Yeah,
What did you notice?
Yes. I noticed a subtle improvement in performance when it comes to longer sets in the gym. So like 2-minute sets versus a minute long set. So more that I guess you could say mid-range exercise activity. In terms of walking, speed, nothing like that. In terms of actual strength in the gym, nothing at all. Yeah, that's where I find the benefit. Like, you know, 1 to 2 minute sets. Really, that's where I found the benefit. I was using. I flip-flopped really. So I've been using something like 1 milligram per day. I've tried something like 2 milligrams only on training days, something like that. But I mean, these things are so short-acting. But what I kind of imagine is over time they have almost like an overlapping effect. It's like so for example, you use 1 milligram, that does that to your body, that transcribes these genes to do this effect. And I think, you know, as your insulin sensitivity improves as you use it, that's when you get more of the benefit. But what I'm curious of is, you know, regardless of your dosing protocol, whether you use 50 milligrams over a week or 50 milligrams over 10 weeks, where is that point where you can just sustain it on like a lower dose? That's the study I want to see, because it's all good saying we get all these benefits, but if we're going to add these things into our, you know, daily protocol or interventions, then you want to know, okay, what point do I not need to use this anymore? You know?
Yeah, kind of makes me think of the GLP-1s, because the GLP-1s, I think the way you have to dose them is, I believe it's every 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 4 weeks, you have to increase the dose of the GLP-1 for the benefits, because I think the body kind of reacts, responds, balances out, and so you have to keep increasing the dose of the GLP-1. I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I've used nearly all of them, funny enough.
Yeah,
but not for the intended benefits that most people do. For me, it's been a case of keeping liver fat low, keeping kidney function high, improving glucose disposal, improving insulin sensitivity, which I already have because I train my muscle mass anyway. But it's interesting to see if I'm already peak, like, is there a way to lower these numbers a bit or something?
Yeah.
So I've been using low doses of it, generally split between 2 shots per week.
Yeah.
I think the practice of increasing the dose over time, even if it's through titration, is not a good idea. You might get no side effects at 2, but you're getting all the fat loss benefits. Okay, you're losing 2 pounds a week. That was part of your goal, that you checked off your objectives each month, whatever. Yeah. Great. So why would you then go to 3 milligrams, but then risk the side effects? Because these things, they're not in and out drugs. It's not like paracetamol. You take it, works for a few hours, and it sort of leaves your system. These things are in there for active life, perhaps maybe 2 to 4 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
So one injection is meant to be 1 injection once per week, and the half-life is roughly 5 to 6 days, depending on what it is and how you use it. Yeah. So it makes me think, you know, you could be compounding a greater and greater deal of GLP-1 medication in your body over time. Then you've got to deal with those side effects for a week. So it's about using, for those things, certainly it's about using the minimum effective dose. They've all got different profiles as well. Some are some work on 1 mechanism, some work on 2, some on 3. The ones with 3 aren't currently out yet in terms of like what you can get typically. But I've used all of them. I'd say they're more beneficial than not for most people. And I think a lot of the side effects are grossly overstated. And I always look at the bigger picture, like what is the outcome of the people that use these? So, you know, they've got these different things we've used over time, Max. We've used calorie counting, Slimming World, Weight Watchers, paleo, Mediterranean diet, vegan. Everyone's tried most of these sort of diets. What they do is they sort of work out, okay, these people have done this diet for 6 months. That lands them here, A to B. Okay, what about C? What about 12 months down the line? What outcomes do they have then? Did they go off the wagon? Did they then binge eat? Did they drop more weight? Was it leveled out? You know, this is what I care about. It's like, what people worry about what happens at that key period of time. It's about the long term. What did that drug or supplement or whatever it was do for you?
Yeah.
And what they found with these GLP-1s is even the rubbishest, lowest grade, lowest scientific rigor, semaglutide, the first one they come out with, that's the injectable. Even that one had better long-term outcomes than calorie counting. Do you see what I mean? So it's if everyone's current standard of weight loss is calorie counting works, in and out, this, that, and the other, but there's a drug here which can do a better job of it with more sustainable outcomes, then why not? Then of course we've got the upgrade of that, Tirzepatide, so that's Manjaro. The results on that even better, perhaps 1.5 to 2 times better in terms of like weight loss over time. Improves more health markers. Then you got Retatrutide, which is in phase 3 clinical trials. That also works on glucagon agonism, so you get less liver fat, better hepatic clearance, things like that. With a slightly lesser side effect profile, depending on who you are specifically. So I think these drugs are helpful. They are not a replacement for your carnivore diet. No, if you've got someone that's struggling to sort of stay on the wagon, either doing all the diet and the lifestyle hacks, but there's something wrong mentally, as in they need some sort of food noise reduction, and that gets them a better place a year from now. I think why not, personally? Of course, you have to sort of do it under the premise of using a healthcare practitioner, monitoring your markers, things like that. So don't just obviously take it,
Sure, and I think the main issue, because I've messed around with Tirzepatide. So I took Tirzepatide. I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was more so taking it for positive habit creating, mental effects, concentration standpoint, to help focus, things like that. But when I was taking like a shot a week. I believe it was only like 10 units of Tirzepatide a week. I never increased the dose. I never increased the frequency of the shots. I stayed 1 shot a week. And to be honest with you, I just wanted to see how it works so I could talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
What was crazy to me was they're powerful. A small shot of Tirzepatide is incredibly powerful. That's what I noticed. It completely changed my digestion. It slowed my entire digestion down for sure, but it was hard to eat food. It was hard to put down food. And I ended up losing weight when I didn't even want to. I lost almost 10 pounds when I didn't even want to lose weight. And I was thinking to myself when I was doing it is, A, I'm not increasing the dosage of this. I don't want to lose any more weight. But B, this stuff is incredibly powerful. But I can see how if you don't fix the underlying issues with the individual's habits, right, their behaviors around food, when they come off a drug that powerful, they're 100% going to gain the weight back. 100%. So it's like, I feel like you have to use a drug like that is that powerful in conjunction with creating better habits, creating better relationships with food. So when they come off the drug, like a carnivore diet in conjunction with that would be a great thing to do and combine together. So when the individual comes off the drug and their appetite increases, they can at least have a diet that keeps them satiated so they don't gain all the weight back. And that's what's interesting. Like, I was talking to the biohacker babes about this. Like, a ton of people are coming off these drugs and they're gaining a lot of the weight back, but it's mainly because they're not fixing the underlying habits that created the weight gain in the first place, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting. I mean, just saying about Tirzepatide then. So my girlfriend Jo, she probably won't mind me saying this, but she's lost about 100 pounds over, I think it's like a year or something.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. But yeah, like a good deal of weight. She's really transformed her body in space of time. So she's using Tirzepatide. She's currently on 10 milligrams per week, split between 2 shots. She doesn't really mention side effects, really, but I know at the start, I think she had a few, but quite minor sort of things. So she follows a carnivore diet, and that was prior to this whole Tirzepatide thing. It's not, she already had the diet right, but she wasn't losing the weight. And it was like, what's going on? And it's not like she binges. I mean, her idea of like a binge might be like half a tub of Ben and Jerry's, like a small tub.
Sure.
And that wouldn't be a frequent thing, Yeah. So it's so it sort of tells me, okay, maybe it's the metabolic aspect of her. Like, maybe she actually needs to find a way to lower her body weight enough so she can be more mobile, more active,
Sure.
increase GLUT4 receptor sensitivity, so she has more of a buffer then to deal with excess blood glucose. But she's using this effectively, and she thinks she'll be using it for forever, basically. I'm kind of in the point where I don't personally care what she does as long as she's healthy, but it'd be good to get to the point where she could come off it. And what the point I'm basically getting to is, if you follow the carnivore diet alongside it, but then your brain teaches you to stick to that more effectively, your gut microbiome will change, which you kind of alluded to. So then you're no longer sort of sugar burning, sugar craving. When you eventually taper down or use less or use different drug or do something else, you'll still have the default of the diet. So that's what I'm trying to explain to her. And I think she does understand this. She's not a daft girl at all, but it's, I mean, what we would have to look forward to is a lot better drugs in the future. There's one out right now. I can't remember it off by hand, so don't quote me on this, but it's something like UBT182, something like that. So it's like I think it's like 4 receptor agonists or something. So that'll also work on finding ways to like increase muscle retention. So the weight might not actually come off as fast, but your actual muscle retention will be much greater.
Oh, wow,
so,
that's cool.
A Ozempic face wouldn't really be a thing. So effectively you're still eating enough protein because your appetite is still there, but your cravings for the, junky stuff isn't. I think that's going to be a best case scenario for bodybuilders. I mean, I know most bodybuilders now I speak to at a high sort of elite level, they use the stuff. They use these drugs completely. So
no, I feel like Mike Israetel, however you say his last name. Yeah. I feel like he made a video about this where it's like, I think he made a video about this a while ago, where it's like, it's basically from a bodybuilding standpoint, it's almost like a magic drug / magic peptide where you don't get the muscle loss benefits, but it helps you with the dieting aspect from a bodybuilding perspective.
Yeah, and he got that information from someone called Jordan Peters. Not Jordan Peterson, but Jordan Peters. He's you may follow on Instagram. He's on my thing, but he's probably the biggest human being at 5'6" you'll ever see.
Yeah,
he is as wide and thick as he is tall, pretty much. Really strong guy, but he's been escalating these doses, all these PEDs for a long time. He's very open and honest about what he takes and stuff. But he's basically said, yeah, this has changed the game for me, which means I can now actually use even more drugs and stay healthier for it, produce a bigger, leaner physique. Yeah, and he's found a lot of benefit from it. The thing is, he's been using, I think he quoted that, the thing is today actually, he's been using 1.2 milligrams of retatrutide daily. That was his peak dose. So that's like 8 milligrams a week. And I'm like, how does anyone eat on that? Like, I struggle a bit to eat on 2.
Yeah.
So it's nuts. But yeah, there's definitely some utility for it, because bodybuilding is about, people think, take loads of anabolic steroids, you get big. And it's about trying to pull different levers to get slowly but surely bigger without impacting your heart, kidney health, blood glucose, things like that. So that's why they're using this drug. So it sounds like polypharmacy, and yes, it is, but it's beneficial polypharmacy. It's not like you're just taking a statin, crashing your cholesterol levels, then getting demented because of it. You're trying to get things just right. So yeah.
It's a bodybuilding is a crazy science that I don't think people really understand. It's like some of these people, I think, like to your point that you were saying earlier, when they're looking at some of these freak bodybuilders like Nick Walker, for instance, they just assume like, yeah, that guy's running like a bunch of steroids, which he is 100%, but it's a pharmacological science project, basically, how to keep these people alive, put on as much mass as possible, keep their body fat percentage low, but also keep them living long enough so they don't die. You know what I mean? It's interesting how bodybuilding works in the enhanced area,
In terms of like the elite level, they pretty much all use a CPAP mask at night to help sleep, help with recovery. They pretty much all
is so
have
damn
massage.
Big, man.
Their neck is huge.
Yeah,
they got big necks.
Yeah.
What else? Very weird like recovery things they do. They might have like Graston therapy twice, 3 times a week. There's a good video out there, or documentary I recommend people actually listen to. This isn't commissioned, it's not affiliated or whatever, but it is interesting. I think it's called. I think it's called like Breaking or something like that by Phil Heath. So a 7-time Mr. Olympia made a film called like Breaking or something like that. It's out, I think, last year, 2025. And it's like his basically it's a perspective of him as an elite athlete, top of his game, retired for 5 years or something. I don't know. This is where his life is at now. And he sort of looks back at what he did in that time. Like, you know, oh, this is where I trained and this is how I did this and found this helpful. These are the foods I stuck to. These are recovery things. And what he is doing for his recovery is to like build his muscle and stay lean and strong and, you know, not injured. His whole protocol for that was obscene. Like it's a full-time job. You don't just go about your day. Oh, I'm gonna go to the gym in a bit. I'll have some food after. Have my chicken and rice. Your whole day is scheduled around recovery because when you deal with like two hours worth of damage in your body in the gym each day, with that much muscle, your body has to work that much harder to keep up to recover. So yeah, he was doing at least 2 to 3 therapy recovery modalities every single day, and he knew that his competition weren't doing that, and it's stuff we've only just heard about recently. He was doing like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So he invested a lot into that, and I think it shows a lot about his ability to sort of stay in shape every single year and make progress and this sort of thing. It's definitely makes a difference. Definitely is a big lever to pull.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've covered we've covered the 80-20, the sardine fast, peptides. What other sort of last minute topics you have, if any?
I want to see kind of just in your opinion, where do you see the carnivore diet going? So I was chatting with, who did I have on yesterday? I did a podcast with Dr. Philip Ovadia. Yeah, the heart surgeon. And I was asking him, you know, what are you seeing in terms of, you know, long-term thoughts on carnivore, people doing carnivore not just as like an elimination diet short-term. Are you seeing any issues long-term with cholesterol levels, blood panel issues? And he was saying no, he's not seeing any issues long-term with on a carnivore diet for an extended period of time, which I thought was interesting because there are some people out there that will always say, hey, carnivore works right now, but in 10, 20 years, you're going to have some issues, which, to be frank, I would agree that, you know, we have some long-term carnivores out there right now, but we don't necessarily have a lot of data or studies around like really long-term carnivore diets and its impact on heart health. But from his perspective, he was saying, eat all the red meat you want, eat all the eggs you want. It's not going to give you heart disease. And I just thought that was really interesting. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And like you say, there aren't enough hardcore scientific studies with enough rigor and reliability to really look at and say, this is what could cause this issue on a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
What I'd really say is like the things that are worst for us in life that we try to do, things with like maybe alcohol misuse, drug abuse, you know, get into fights. There's always an acute response. It's you drink too much alcohol, you get sick, you don't feel good. Liver could be sore, damaged, whatever. Everyone's like drugs. You could go mentally unstable. You could hurt someone, acute damage. What was the third one? You know, stabbing someone, for example. You know, you'll be locked up in prison, acute problem. So what I'm trying to say is I think anything which is giving something beyond what you call an acute benefit. So start the carnivore diet, 2 weeks later, feeling much better, sleeping better, digestion better, If it was going to be bad for us to the point that we'd have to stop doing it, there'd be an early warning sign. There'd be a big signal. You know, we'd all be getting scurvy. We'd all be backed up all week. You know, all this sort of thing. And obviously there's different health markers and objective metrics we can look at. But personally, we haven't yet, in my opinion, identified really a mechanism of action for that to happen. I don't believe any lipid marker is an accurate, reliable way of tracking health data. LDL, HDL, cholesterol, triglycerides, ApoE, or whatever it is, any of those weird sort of genetic polymorphisms, I don't think any of them really indicate anything in terms of heart health. And obviously heart health is, you know, cardiac diseases, the big killer alongside closely behind, I believe, cancer and things like that. But we don't see people having cancer. Well, we can, but there's not many people out there with cancer on a carnivore diet. Anyone that seems to have tried a keto low carb approach seems to be doing better. We can look at mechanistic data on rodents. We can look at the fact that ketogenic diets tend to have better long-term health outcomes, better mitochondrial function. So the better our mitochondrial complexes effectively function, create energy, the more ATP we have. Therefore, the greater the level of, what's the word? And it's like a deterrent. If we've got enough energy in our body for our mitochondria to that are produced from our mitochondria, then that allows us to execute the script of our genetic makeup to fight off cancer. We've got more energy to do that with. We've got rid of the things that could be causing cancer. So it's a doubling up effect in a sense. So there's some mechanistic data in that regard to say that it would improve, long-term health outcomes.
Yeah.
Like you say, it's not. There'll be someone out there that, God forbid, touch wood, but there'll be someone out there that dies of a carnivore diet for some reason. But the chance are it's probably because they didn't cut their steak up well enough and choked.
Well, what he was saying was, have people switch to a carnivore diet and gotten heart attacks? Yes, but it's because they've had the progression of 20, 30, 40,
years.
50 years. They go to switch to a carnivore diet at 60, 70 years old, and they have a heart attack 2 weeks or 2 years later or whatever. And then people will say, oh, it's because you went on the carnivore diet. No, you've had 50 years of plaque progression and bad dietary habits 50 years prior to that caused the plaque buildup. You were going to have a heart attack anyways, no matter what, So that's what he was saying. But I think it just goes to show that the sooner someone can start cleaning up the diet, the better long-term position that they'll be in. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of these tests for different things. Coronary artery calcium score is meant to be one of the gold standard tests to measure calcification and plaque. Problem with that is you also need to identify is it soft or hard plaque. Doing intensive protocols to reduce the plaque within your arteries can actually be quite dangerous if they're not the appropriate, the soft plaque sort of thing. Effectively, you're trying to dislodge something, but I think if you dislodge something and it causes more damage down the line because it's loose, then you set yourself up for bigger problems. So I think, this will be probably the last topic for today, but I think we have to transition to this diet carefully and over time. I think start it sooner rather than later, yes, but sooner as in, do something more like keto carnivore, then go more towards what you're doing with carrots and onions than me. Then you might go a bit stricter down the line, but then you might find there was no point. I tried all these. I don't see there's any point in me cutting out dairy, to be honest. I've never noticed a detriment from it unless I've eaten a pound of cheese, but I'm not going to do that very often.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry, so it's not the cheese that damaged me. It's the fact that I eat too much cheese.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what's your thoughts on transition? Like if you were to go back in time and say, this is the best way for Max Helmer to transition to a keto or carnivore diet, how would you do it? Over what period of time, and what would you add or include or remove over different points?
Yeah. So I played around with a whole bunch of different diets when I was doing CrossFit. I was eating paleo, and when I was trying to get lean, I would do Tim Ferriss's slow carb diet, right? So incorporating a lot of chicken, eggs, ground beef, leaner meat, veggies with black beans. That was the slow carb diet. I think at the end of the day, the best way to transition is to move to a whole foods, unprocessed, single ingredient approach first. Just think meat, veggies, eggs, and prioritize it in that order: meat, veggies, eggs. Move to a whole foods based approach. That is the perfect place to start, in my opinion. Some people might agree. I just think going to a whole foods based approach is the best way to go. Then from there, you can slowly start to transition based off whatever it is you want to do. You can go more ketogenic. You can go more carnivore. You can go more ketovore. Again, I think that's what I'm going back to is what I was saying earlier. This is where the individual might have to experiment with how their body reacts. Like sometimes if you go a whole foods based approach and you go into a high fat carnivore diet, kind of like I did, you might run into some digestive issues. So you have to experiment, see how your body reacts and responds. And then ideally over time, as Bart K was saying, you want to get to, over a slow transition, a hyper carnivore diet, as he would put it, where 70% of your intake is coming from animal foods, animal products. That's basically what he said on my podcast with him. And to be honest with you, I agree, but the transition has to be made slowly over time so your gut can keep up, the gut microbiome can adapt and change over time, so you're not running into issues that Bella was running into when I was interviewing her. She went full blown into the carnivore diet and was running to the bathroom every 10 seconds with diarrhea. Well, it's because she was basically eating and pouring tons of liquid hot fat over everything that was just running straight through her. So there's a way in which you can transition over to a carnivore diet sustainably to make it work over for the long term. But that's how I would do it. Whole foods based approach first, and then go either more keto, more ketovore, more carnivore, based off whatever it is you're trying to do. But essentially, I think what we ultimately want to get to is the majority of the food that we're taking in, we want it to come from animals. That's how we're designed. That's it.
Yeah, makes most sense. I mean, just to support your claim about, you know, the processed foods. I mean, depending on whether you're in the UK or the USA, the average person in our demographics is consuming between 60 and 80% processed foods in their diet.
Yeah.
So if you've just said to me, Max, remove 60 to 80% of the food in your diet, you've done a lot there. You know, not only have you reduced the hyperpalatable foods, you've reduced the not nutrient poor, probably anti-nutrient rich foods. So you've actually done a double whammy effect.
Yeah.
If someone's overweight, even better sort of things, they can actually use that to the point. I've tried lots of different ways of introducing people to it, and I've found really over about 3 or 4 weeks is about enough for most people. But then that means from, you know, standard Western diet to carnivore diet. But the people that come to me are already, you know, usually very fit, they're athletic, so perhaps maybe 40 rather than 60 years old. So obviously there's slightly bit of bias towards that kind of scale of things in terms of length of time to transition. I tend to do meal by meal, so get rid of so meal one, if you have 3 meals per day, meal one, make it bacon and eggs rather than toast and jam.
Yep.
Meal two, after 2-3 weeks, same thing again. Meal three, same thing again, and that tends to work quite well. It's a bit better socially as well, because people will notice in a family setting or friendship setting, oh, they're eating a bit less of this now, they're eating more of that. Oh, that's interesting. By the time you get to like 4, 5, 6 weeks along the line, it's only the evening meal out that has any carbs left in it. And if you're socializing, it fits in really well. So
that's
I
actually
tend to make it that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And to your point about what Professor Bart K said, we've got the same viewpoint in this basically. So we came to this conclusion about maybe 2 to 2.5 years ago. 1-to-1 protein to fat ratio, hypercarnivore diet, 70% of your diet roughly being ruminant meat, 30% being eggs, dairy, fish, offal, whatever you like, and that might skew in certain directions depending on your ancestry, what's local to you, things like that, where you live, things like, you know. So in terms of energy amounts, it just vary. We can't really prescribe that because people are so different in sizes, but yeah, that's what I found most people, 1-to-1 protein to fat. If I was to pick an average person I know off the street, probably 150 protein, 150 fat, below 50 grams of carbs. Some people need below 30, some below 20, below 10 as well. For me, I just keep mine below 30. 30 is about my threshold. That's about it. That's where most people end up landing, and it's not 2-to-1 fat diet. It may have been historically. I understand why people say that, but you know, historically people weren't doing intensive workouts. They were walking quite a lot, so maybe they didn't need as much protein, things like that. So yeah.
And another thing too, like Richard Smith said this, and I thought it made a lot of sense. If you just focus on eating the foods how they would naturally occur in nature, right? So if you look at the makeup of an egg, what is it? 6 grams of protein, 4 grams of fat in an egg, right? That's a pretty solid distribution of how things should go. Now, in nature, we weren't cooking a steak or cooking meat over a fire and then pouring slabs of butter on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just thought that made a lot of sense. If you're just eating the meat with how it naturally comes, there's fat on it, not fat on it, whatever the case, that is a good place to just start, and it's roughly going to be close to, I would say, 1-to-1. You it might be slightly tilted more towards the protein than it is the fat, but just eat the meat how it naturally comes. I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's largely it. And there's a lot. It's an in and out process. Obviously, it's good to say that, but you have people often without a gallbladder, low tolerance to fat, histamine intolerance. The food might change a bit. And obviously, that's where all these, because by default of being a carnivore, oftentimes a lot of us have health issues. That's why we start it.
Sure.
So the proportionality of us might be, rather than being 10% unhealthy people, 90% healthy, it might be 50-50 healthy and unhealthy. Health being a broad sort of term, but someone that's not consciously thinking day to day about their health outcomes, they're probably going to be a healthy person. So it depends where your start point is as well. But yeah, I think if I was to sort of give a broad statement, no processed foods, meat, like you said, as it comes from the animal naturally without it being tampered with. Cooking food as preferred. Some people prefer it raw, some people don't. Drink to first, salt to taste. It's simple stuff really. We say it sounds so generic, but I think most people will end up at that point.
Yeah.
Would you say the same, or
100%? 100%. It's the basics. Don't overcomplicate it. Like, it isn't easy, but it is simple. Don't overcomplicate it. That's what I would say. The basics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, cheers for your time today, Max. I appreciate you coming on.
This was great, Jonathan.
These
Thanks
things
for
are
having me, man.
I'm honestly very grateful for you to come on, and obviously I've done a recording on your channel. I'll probably put that in the comments box below in the description or something. I'm going to keep an eye on the comments below this video if anyone's watching it. Perhaps you could ask us some questions for next time if we do another recording. We've done a lot around diet today, diet trends, but maybe we could do something around exercise, recovery, what we've done, maybe peptide stuff, extra stuff. Just ask us below in the comments what you actually want. We'll be able to see what we can do.
Let's talk about the exercise stuff next time. That'll be fun.
That'll be fun. All right. Nice one. Cheers, Max.
All right. Take care, bud.
Build muscle and lose fat on the carnivore diet.